Hello, my name is Mr. Silva, and I am your band and orchestra director. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. The purpose of this video is to introduce all of the different instruments that are available for our new incoming music students. Parents, if you're watching this video alone, please press pause and bring your child on over so that they can see all of the different instruments that they have to choose from. This particular video is geared for our orchestra students. And our beginning orchestra class is entitled or called String Orchestra. So if you registered for String Orchestra, you're watching the correct video. Now I want to take this moment to inform you that there is a difference between band and orchestra. So let me quickly describe to you what the difference is. Band refers to the classes where we teach wind instruments or percussion. And wind instruments would include any instruments that the student would have to blow into for it to make sound. Now, orchestra is a different class. It's a different type of instrumentation. If you ever hear me say the word orchestra, we are talking about music classes where string instruments are taught. Those include only 4 instruments, and they all kind of look alike, but they're different sizes. And they also play at different pitch levels. Some of them play higher, and some of them play lower. Those include the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass. I will be asking you to go on to the link that I provided, and you're going to fill out the survey where you're going to indicate your final choice. And if this survey is not turned in, I will be assigning an instrument on my behalf. At the end of the video, I will also be explaining the process to how I assign each individual student their instrument. It's a little bit of a complicated process, but I want to make sure that everybody is aware and understands how it all works. So here we go.
Let me first help to illustrate the importance of having a balanced instrumentation. What that means is we have to have a good proportion of each of the 4 instruments in the orchestra. For example, we cannot have 40 students playing violin and only 1 viola, 1 cello, and 1 bass. That is not good instrumentation. I'm sure a lot of you have played baseball at some point, so let me make an analogy that we might all understand. If we were playing baseball, we can't have everybody on the team be the pitcher and nobody else doing anything in the game. The game would not function that way. And the same is true for the orchestra. We have to have a balance. As you see, the instruments that are towards the bottom of the pyramid are instruments that we want more sound of. Now, I say it that way because sound could be bigger when we have a bigger instrument. So I'm not trying to say that we need more quantity of those instruments. For instance, I'm not saying we should have 30 bass players. That wouldn't work out either. Keep in mind that the bass is a larger instrument than the violin, much larger, so it produces a lot more sound from one player alone. Ideally, if we had a class of 40 students in the orchestra, we would like to have somewhere around, and these numbers, they might not add up to 40, and that's okay. We might want 3 bass players, 6 to 8 cellos, 6 to 8 violas, and maybe 18 to 22 violins. And again, those numbers might not add up to 40. It's a rough estimate of what we want. So I'm sure that a lot of you want to play violin. That's usually the most popular instrument students want to play in the orchestra. But please have an open mind as I present the other instruments to you. You might find something or hear something that you enjoy. As you watch the rest of this video, students, please make sure that you have something to write with, take some notes, so that you can remember what you're looking at and what you're listening to. Let us continue. Let us begin with talking about the 4 different instruments that are available for you to choose from in our orchestra class. I'll begin with the largest of the 4 instruments and also the lowest sounding of the 4 instruments, and that is the string bass. Some people will also refer to it as the double bass. And that distinction is important because if you tell somebody, I play the bass, they might think that you're in a rock band and that you play the electric bass, which is a different instrument. If you take a look at your screen right now, you'll see what I'm talking about. There are 2 ways that you can play this instrument. As you see in the picture on your screen, you can play the instrument standing up. Now, don't let the size of the instrument put fear in you from choosing this instrument. You can kind of tell how big it is just from seeing the picture. This is an adult male who is playing the instrument, and the instrument is a little taller than he is. But what you see on the screen is what we call a full-sized bass, and that is what he is playing. At Granada, we actually don't have any full-sized basses in our inventory. The biggest size bass that we own is a 3/4 size bass, which is smaller than what you see on the screen. We also own one half-size bass, which is even smaller and is well suited for most 6th grade students. So don't let the size scare you away from choosing this instrument. Now, a couple reasons why you should choose the bass. Have you ever watched a really cool movie and heard deep sounding orchestral music that's kind of hinting that something's about to happen, and you're at the edge of your seat and your heart is racing and you feel that momentum? That's most likely the sound of basses playing that low sounding frequency, that low sounding sound. And the cool part about the bass is that when you play it, it kind of leans either towards your hip, or if you're sitting on a stool, that's another way that you can play the bass. It kind of leans into your body a little bit, and you can actually feel those low sounding vibrations. And it's such a cool instrument. Now, the other thing to note about this instrument is that you actually won't really be able to find a music store that will rent a bass to you. So what does that mean? That means you're going to have to borrow an instrument from the school. There's really no other way around it. So in that sense, if you end up picking the bass, you're almost pretty much, and I can't say 100% for sure, but there's a really, really good chance that you are guaranteed an instrument for you to borrow from the school at no charge to you. If you end up playing the bass long term and you become really good at it, it does require a lot of discipline and a lot of practice. It can mean scholarship money because not a lot of people like to pick up the bass, but it is such a cool instrument. Something that some students will do is some people will go onto Amazon, and I know I usually don't say purchase instruments on Amazon, but this is the one exception where I'll tell students to go on Amazon and purchase their own electric upright practice bass. It's basically what you see on the picture on your screen right now, except it doesn't have the body of the instrument, which is the wood, the brown colored part of the instrument. So if you end up purchasing something like that, you can actually keep one at home, and then when you're at school, you can practice the one that we loan you. Now, before I play a video for you of someone playing the bass so you can hear what it sounds like, let me give you some final reasons why you should consider playing the bass. Number one, our entire class depends on the bass. Like I showed you at the beginning of this video, the bass is the foundation of our sound pyramid. It is such an important instrument for our class. The basses create the foundation of our music. Number two, if you choose the bass, you will belong to a small section. You are one of the few instruments in the section, and you can be heard rather than having 20 or sometimes even 30 other students playing the same instrument. And I'm referring to the violin. It's also an opportunity to become friends with everyone in the section and easily learn everyone's work habits. Number three, the instrument creates a big sound. Because the instrument is large, there is a lot of room for the instrument to project and fill a room with sound. It's a great feeling. Number four, it's an instrument that is needed in many different types of music. Sometimes you'll see the bass in classical, jazz, pop, folk, hip hop, rap, and so many other settings. It creates the foundation in music, as I mentioned earlier. Number five, for classical music, there are two options for styles of bows: the French bow and the German bow. None of the other instruments in the orchestra have two options for how to hold your bow. So if you end up picking the bass and one of the bow holds that I teach you does not work for you, you have the option to switch to the other bow and see if that'll work for you. Number 6. For classical music, basses get multiple roles. Normally, basses, you get the job of creating that foundation, holding that long note, sustaining the sound for the orchestra. But sometimes you get the option to play the melody. For instance, have you heard of Jaws? The basses get to play the melody in the movie Jaws. It can be fun to change roles and not have to necessarily stick to being the support or playing those long notes underneath the melody. Number 7, picking up the bass could help you down the road if you decide that you want to play the guitar. Because if you want to learn the guitar, you're going to have an easy time picking up the instrument, having some knowledge of the bass. The bass has the bottom 4 strings of a guitar: the E string, the A string, the D string, and the G string. I'll teach you what all of that means. Let's take a listen to what the bass sounds like.
Hi, I'm Dan, and I play the bass, sometimes called the double bass or the upright bass. The bass is the largest and lowest pitched instrument in the string family. It can be both played with the bow and pizzicato. The bass is played in the orchestra, as well as jazz bands, rock bands, and several other ensembles.
Let's talk about our next instrument, which is the cello. The cello, as you see on the screen, kind of looks like the bass. However, it is much smaller. It is a very beautiful sounding instrument. It has the ability to play low. It has that low C string. But as you get more advanced, we also learn to play on the A string and move up to higher positions, which can almost mimic the sound of a viola, maybe even a violin as you get really advanced. It has a very wide range of notes. If you become a cello player, you can be rest assured that you will be very comfortable as you play this instrument. As you see on your screen, there's only one way to play the instrument, and that is sitting down. The instrument rests on the ground with an end pin so it comes up to the proper height, and you're very comfortable as you play it. So it doesn't need to rest on your shoulder, and there's very little tension on your body as you play the instrument. Now, something to note about the cello: while it is not as large as the bass, it's still somewhat of a large instrument. However, the good news about this instrument, just like the bass, and actually all of our orchestra instruments, it does come in different sizes. What you see on the screen is the largest size cello. Now, just like the bass, the cello can come in 4/4 size, which is also known as full size. That's the largest size you can get, and that's what you see on the screen. The next size that is smaller than that down would be 3/4 size, and I would guarantee that the majority of our incoming 6th grade students are going to need a 3/4 size cello. So keep that in mind as you are going out to rent, or if you're going to purchase an instrument, make sure that you get properly fitted. But I guarantee most of you will end up playing a 3/4 size cello. Now, if you're a bit on the smaller side of your other peers, if you're a little bit smaller than the rest of the peers in your grade level and you're a 6th grader, you might even need a half-sized cello, which is even smaller than that. But again, the only way to really know is if you go to your local music store or wherever you're purchasing the cello from to get properly fitted. That is so important, because if you get a cello that's too big or too small, you're going to end up putting a lot of unnecessary strain on your wrist and your fingertips and your fingers in general. And that's going to cause a lot of problems later on. So please make sure that you get properly fitted. Now, the other thing to note as you're going out to rent or purchase a cello, a lot of cello cases come with what we call a soft case, which doesn't provide a lot of protection for the instrument. I would highly recommend that you request that you get a hard case that has wheels and it has a handle at the top so you can just wheel it over. It offers more protection for your instrument, and it also offers the ability for you to roll your instrument as opposed to having to carry it. So if you're worried about the size of the instrument, you're worried about having to carry it back and forth, I highly recommend that you invest or that you request a hard case that has wheels with a handle so that you can roll your instrument. Let's take a listen to what the cello sounds like.
My name is Carlito. I play the cello. One of my favorite things about playing the cello is that I get to play with a bunch of friends, but also get to play solo things as well. Playing cello, you usually play in bass clef, but you also get to play in tenor sometimes.
The next instrument I would like to show you is the viola. And if you look at the picture of the viola on your screen, most of your friends might think that it looks like a violin, and you are correct. So what's the difference? The viola is larger than the violin, and as a result, it plays lower than the violin. If you were already convinced that you wanted to play the violin and nothing else, give this a chance. The viola is a beautiful middle ground between the cello and the violin. If you kind of like the cello, but you're really intimidated by its size, the viola might be a good option. Just like the cello, the viola has a C string, so it has a very deep, low, rich sound, unlike the violin that has a more higher pitched and sometimes even screechy sounding tone. Although the viola mathematically has the best acoustics of the string family, it is a little bit physically awkward and maybe even non-ergonomic. It does rest on your left shoulder, and it can be a little bit cumbersome. I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. Now, just like the other instruments in the orchestra, the viola is offered in different sizes. However, unlike the other three instruments, the viola is not measured in fractions. So when you go to the music store to rent an instrument, or if you're going to purchase one, do not ask for a 3/4 size viola because that does not exist. Instead, the viola is measured in inches. The average incoming 6th grade student will need a viola anywhere between a 14.5-inch to possibly a 15-inch viola. Again, if you're going to go rent or purchase a viola, you should be properly fitted so that you know you're getting the right sized viola. This is why I highly caution parents against purchasing instruments through Amazon, eBay, or any other online source, because there's no way for you to be properly fitted. And then you're going to end up with a lot of headaches and major maintenance issues down the road. Please avoid purchasing instruments online. I highly caution against it, no matter how good the price tag might look. You are much better off going to a professional, reputable, and well-trusted local music store. The other benefit of purchasing locally is if for some reason something goes wrong, you can always go back and tell them what's going on, and they can help you. Lastly, in this little plug for purchasing or renting locally, if you are going to rent, I would highly encourage you to look into a rent-to-own rental program. If you mention that to your local music shop, they might offer that option. And what that means is that every month you are paying a rental monthly fee. However, instead of that rental monthly fee basically going down the drain, it would be applied towards the purchase and the price of that instrument that you're renting. So after some time, usually a year or two, you will have paid off your instrument. A little bit more about the viola. Violists tend to have a better trained ear than most other string musicians. And the reason is that the viola section decides the overall tonality of the string ensemble. One way that I can easily explain this is you can think of violas being the meat of the hamburger. Without meat in the hamburger, you don't have a hamburger. And this is why the viola section is so crucially important. On average, in a typical school year at Granada Middle School, we will have anywhere between 6 to 12 viola students. And that is relatively a small section. So as a result, the viola is not as competitive as the violin or even the cello. So like I mentioned with the bass instrument, you become a tight-knit section of viola students. So you get to work together and feel proud that you are the middle foundation of the entire ensemble. The viola is such an important and crucial element of our group. Without violas, we are missing that middle sound of the group. Violas will sometimes have the melody, and sometimes they perform a supporting role. The other thing about viola is if you end up picking the viola and later down the road you decide you'd like to play violin, it's kind of easy to switch over to the violin. The opposite is not true. It is difficult for a violin player to switch to viola. The other thing to note about the viola is that the viola is the only instrument in our entire music program that plays in alto clef. And in that sense, you become proud that you are the alto clef musicians. Later down the road, possibly in high school and definitely in college, you will learn to play treble clef to play the higher notes on this instrument. It is such a gorgeous sounding instrument, and I'd like for you to take a listen so that you know what it sounds like. And I highly encourage you to pick the viola because it is not a very large instrument compared to the bass or the cello. The case is not that large, and it is not as competitive as the violin. So take a listen.
Hi, I'm Raquel, and I play the viola. The viola is bigger and lower than the violin. In fact, that's my favorite part about playing it, is its deep, rich tone. But we can play loud and high too. In the orchestra, violas usually play the harmony, sometimes the melody too. We play an alto and treble clef.
And last but not least, we have arrived at the violin, the smallest of the 4 stringed instruments in our orchestra class. The violin is definitely the most competitive instrument in our orchestra class and music in general. It is the highest sounding instrument. It has the high E string, which means the violin can play very, very, very high. If you end up picking the violin, please note that it is quite a challenging instrument and it will require a lot of practice in order for you to achieve a really good sound. Because it is a small instrument, we also have a very light case if you pick the violin. Because there is typically such a high interest in this instrument, if you want to play the violin, you are highly recommended to rent or purchase your own violin because our school inventory cannot accommodate everybody who wants to play the violin. As I've already mentioned, if you're going to play the violin, please do not purchase a violin online, even though you might find some really good deals. Just like the other 3 instruments, the violin comes in different sizes. The typical middle school 6th grader that comes into our program will usually play a 3/4 size violin. As I already mentioned, please make sure that you are properly fitted when you visit your local music store to rent or purchase a violin. The last thing I would like to note about the violin is that I do place a limit as to how many students may play the violin in our orchestra class. And as a result, I will only be picking the first 20 students who submit their instrument survey first come, first served. So if you really want to play the violin, you are highly encouraged to rent your own violin or purchase and submit your survey as soon as possible. Once the spots are filled up, you will be forced to pick a different instrument. So please do not wait if you are really serious about playing the violin. Something else to keep in mind about the violin is that it is the most challenging instrument in the orchestra because the violin tends to have the most notes in our typical music, which means you're going to end up playing a lot of notes and the notes tend to move very quickly. So just keep in mind that if you do decide to pick up the violin, you're in for a big challenge. It's a great instrument, and I cannot overemphasize the requirement for you to play your instrument daily at least 30 minutes a day in order to quickly excel and improve on this challenging instrument. Let's take a listen because the violin has such a beautiful sound that very closely mimics the sound of a human voice singing so gorgeously. Let's take a listen.
Hello, my name is Arash, and I play the violin. My favorite part about playing the violin is playing fast.
Hi, I'm Sierra. What I love about violin is how diverse it can get. It's mostly known for playing classical music, but it can play other stuff as well.
And now at this time, I will guide you through selecting your instrument choices. Please click on the link that I have provided you, and you will be able to access the instrument survey that you see on your screen. Please carefully read the instructions that I have provided. Enter student first name. Make sure you type in the student's first name. Sometimes I'll get parents putting their first name. Student last name. Carefully select what class you registered for. Parent email, parent phone number, and please make sure that these are contact information that you are looking at over the summer in case I need to contact you regarding these selections. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this survey on this video is so I can explain the somewhat complicated process that I undergo to assign instruments to all of our students. And there are about 100 students total that are new to our program that I assign. So it is a challenge for me, but I do my very best to make sure that everyone is happy with the instrument they are assigned. So as you see here in this question, these options, I'm asking you how you're going to get your musical instrument. These options are listed in the order in which students get priority. So for instance, the first option is that you're going to purchase a new or a used instrument, and don't let the word used instrument make you panic. Used instruments, sometimes they work better than newer instruments because they've undergone that break-in process that they need to go through. But please make sure you purchase through a reputable local vendor. If you don't know where to go to, you can ask me. Or you can check our website under resources. There's a list of local music stores. But please, please, please do not purchase instruments through Amazon or eBay unless you want a lot of headaches later on. I promise you, you will have a lot of issues in terms of the instrument not breaking on you. Trust me, I have seen it many times. So if you choose that option, your child is pretty much guaranteed whatever their first choice instrument is. The second option is you already own the instrument. So maybe you have a trumpet or you have a violin that you already have in your house. The only thing I would suggest is if the instrument has not been used in a couple years, please have it maintained and cleaned at a local music shop so that we know it's going to work on the first day. Maybe you're going to rent an instrument through a local music store. This means you're going to pay a monthly fee to that music store for them to let you borrow their instrument. So that's a rental. You'll have to look at the music shop list that is on the website, and that's gmsmusic.org, so that you can see where to rent from. The next option is we're going to borrow an instrument from a friend, a family member, or some other source. And again, if you're going to borrow from somebody, make sure you have the instrument service maintained so that it works on day one. Now, these last three options, we start to get into the options where the priority is going to go to first come, first serve, because our school is very limited on how many instruments we can loan out. So be careful. If you are very serious about your first choice, I would highly recommend, if you're able to financially or if you're able to borrow from somebody else, try to go for these options at the top. So now the next three questions you're going to fill out, you're going to choose the first choice instrument and make sure that you choose an instrument that belongs to your class, either orchestra or band. So that's your first choice. Maybe you want to play flute. Then your second choice, in case for some reason I cannot assign you to your first choice. So usually I try to stick with first choice and second choice. Worst case scenario, this is kind of rare. Sometimes I have to go with third choice. So make sure the three instruments you choose are three instruments that you will be happy with. Now, please don't choose the same three instruments. For instance, don't do flute, flute, flute. because then I'm going to be forced to choose an instrument that maybe you don't even like. And if you have any questions, please type them in here. And make sure you submit this by the deadline. If you have any questions, please make sure you email me. My email is rsilva@ewcsd.org. Thank you so much for watching this video. I look forward to directing you next school year. And until then, have a wonderful day.